at it, Adam. Feast thine eyes on a sight that approacheth heaven itself.
You've been to a lot of places and you've seen a lot of things, Pa. But you never seen or been to heaven.
For most of its 14-year run, Sunday nights belonged to the Ponderosa, when families gathered around the television, and for 1 hour, the world outside didn't matter. Bonanza wasn't just a show, it was a ritual. A sprawling ranch, a widowed father, 3 sons who couldn't have been more different, and a map burning its way into memory. For 14 years it held us. But behind that iconic theme song and those vast Nevada skies, there were stories most of us never knew. Stories about the people who brought it to life and the choices that shaped everything we came to love. Fact number 10. The voice of doom becomes a father when Shakespeare met the sagebrush and changed television forever. Lorne Greene landed the role of Ben Cartwright after producer David Dortort saw his commanding performance in an episode of Wagon Train and his role in CBS's 1984. Before that, he'd been known as the Voice of Doom during World War II, narrating Canadian wartime broadcasts that kept a nation informed through its darkest hours. He was trained at New York's Neighborhood Playhouse and had performed Shakespeare, including Othello and Julius Caesar, as well as Broadway productions, never imagining he'd end up on a television western. When producer David Dortort offered him the part of Ben Cartwright, Greene hesitated. Westerns weren't exactly prestigious work for a serious actor, but something in the script spoke to him. This wasn't just another shoot-'em-up. It was about a widowed father trying to raise 3 sons alone in an unforgiving world. Greene understood that kind of weight. He signed on, and in doing so, became the father figure millions of viewers never knew they needed. His commanding presence and natural warmth transformed Ben Cartwright from a character on the page into someone who felt like family, the steady moral center that anchored the Ponderosa for 14 years. Fact number 9. The color gamble that saved everything when a network bet on beauty to sell the future of television. NBC almost canceled Bonanza before it even had a chance to find its audience. The ratings were dismal in that first season, airing opposite Perry Mason on Saturday nights, and the show was hemorrhaging money because filming in color was extraordinarily expensive compared to black and white. But NBC's parent company, RCA, had a problem they desperately needed to solve. They were manufacturing color television sets that nobody wanted to buy because most programs were still broadcast in black and white. Bonanza became their solution. RCA executives looked at those sweeping shots of Lake Tahoe's crystalline blue waters, the emerald forests of Ponderosa pines, and the vivid costumes against Nevada's vast skies, and they saw something worth gambling on. They kept the show alive purely as a showcase for what color television could do. RCA used Bonanza as a showcase to promote their color television sets, demonstrating what viewers were missing without the technology. It worked. By 1961, when Bonanza moved to Sunday nights at 9, color television sales had climbed, and the show's ratings soared with them. Bonanza became the #1 program in America by 1964, a position it held for 3 years. Fact number 8, the song the Cartwrights nearly sang, when 4 men on horseback almost became a choir. The Bonanza theme song we all remember had a secret. Composers Jay Livingston and Ray Evans wrote lyrics for that galloping melody, and in the pilot episode, they filmed a scene where the Cartwright men actually sang them while riding back to the ranch. Picture Ben, Adam, Hoss, and Little Joe belting out lines about having a gun and a rope and a hat full of hope.
With a gun and a rope and a hat full of hope.
And a house full of friends where the rainbow ends.
With a house full of friends where the rainbow ends, how rich can a fella be?
The footage was shot. The scene was in the can, ready to close out the series premiere. But before the pilot aired, something felt wrong. Dortort, along with the studio and the songwriters themselves, determined the sequence was too campy, too light for what they wanted the show to be. Pernell Roberts, the only trained vocalist in the cast, had actually refused to participate, perhaps sensing the same thing. The scene was pulled, and the instrumental version took its place. That galloping, wordless theme became one of the most recognizable pieces of music in television history. Lorne Greene later recorded a version with different lyrics in 1964. Johnny Cash did his own take in 1962. Neither was ever used on the show. Sometimes what you don't hear matters just as much as what you do. Fact number 7. The scholar who played simple, when television's gentle giant had more degrees than his character had sense. Dan Blocker weighed 14 pounds when he was born in DeKalb, Texas, making him the largest baby ever recorded in Bowie County. That size stayed with him. By the time he reached Sul Ross State University, He stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 300 pounds. But what most viewers never knew was that the man playing the lovable, simple-minded Hoss Cartwright held a master's degree in dramatic arts. He'd taught high school English and drama in Texas, New Mexico, and California before ever stepping in front of a camera. He was the only cast member with an advanced degree. The irony wasn't lost on him. Hoss was conceived as a stereotype, the gentle giant who was good-hearted but slow on the uptake. Blocker brought something deeper to the role. He said he kept a quote from Stephen Grelly in mind while playing Hoss, something about passing through this world only once and showing whatever kindness we can while we're here. That philosophy shaped every scene. Off camera, Blocker was gregarious, warm, and deeply intelligent. His co-star Mitch Vogel described him as the kind of guy you could sit down and have a beer with. For 13 seasons, viewers watched Hoss and never knew they were watching a scholar playing at simplicity. That gap between actor and character made the performance all the more remarkable. Fact number 6. The rebel who walked away from fortune, when Shakespeare met the sagebrush and decided it wasn't enough. Pernell Roberts never wanted to be Adam Cartwright forever. The eldest son of the Cartwright clan was played by a man who'd won a Drama Desk Award for his off-Broadway portrayal of Macbeth, who'd performed with Joanne Woodward on Broadway, who'd trained in the classical theater, and saw himself as an artist first, and a television actor a distant second. 6 years into Bonanza's run, at the height of the show's popularity when it was the #1 program in America, Roberts walked away. He told reporters he felt like Isaac Stern sitting in with Lawrence Welk, trapped playing a grown man who still had to say, "Yes, Pa," and "No, Pa" on cue. It wasn't just artistic frustration. Roberts later admitted the situation became so unbearable that he sought help from a doctor, saying the role had become a real mental crusher for him. Lorne Greene begged him to stay, promising that if he stuck it out, he'd earn enough to build his own theater and commission plays from writers like Tennessee Williams. But Roberts couldn't wait. He left in 1965, forfeiting a fortune, and never once regretted it. Adam Cartwright was written off as having gone to sea, leaving the door open for his return. He never came back. Sometimes dignity costs more than money can buy. Fact number 5. The young man with silver hair. When Little Joe's dark curls came from a bottle named Clairol, Michael Landon was barely 22 years old when he stepped into the role of Little Joe Cartwright, the impulsive youngest son with a charming smile and thick, dark curls. But those famous locks weren't quite what they appeared to be. Landon had started going gray in his early 20s, an almost cruel twist for an actor cast specifically for his youthful appeal. While his older co-stars, Lorne Greene and Pernell Roberts, wore hairpieces to cover their thinning hair, Landon faced a different problem entirely. He bought bottles of Clairol medium ash brown and dyed his hair himself for years, though he eventually allowed professionals on set to handle the dyeing. He refused to go to salons, cutting and coloring his own hair in private. The sun beating down on the Ponderosa set would sometimes turn the dye an unexpected shade of lavender after a few days of filming, but Landon kept at it. It was a peculiar vanity for such a young man, but he understood something essential about television. The camera didn't care about your age, only about how you looked under the lights. Little Joe needed to be young and handsome, and if that meant dyeing away the gray every few weeks, then that's what he would do. Fact number 4. The night the horses were attacked, when violence came to the Ponderosa and changed Little Joe's mount forever. In late September or early October of 1964, something unthinkable happened at Fat Jones Stables in North Hollywood, where the Bonanza horses were kept. An intruder broke into the stable in the middle of the night, wielding a knife, and attacked several of the horses while they slept. Among those savagely stabbed was Tomahawk, the striking black and white paint that had carried Michael Landon as Little Joe Cartwright for the first 6 years of the series. The horse's character name was Cochise, named after the famous Apache chief, and viewers had come to recognize that distinctive pattern as much as they recognized Little Joe himself. The veterinarians tried desperately to save him, but the wounds were too severe. Tomahawk had to be put down. Michael Landon was devastated. He immediately posted a substantial reward for information leading to the capture of whoever had done this senseless, brutal thing. The reward was never claimed. The attacker was never found. Production was about to resume for the new season, and a stunt double paint had to take over the role of Cochise. Over the remaining years of the show, 6 different paints would wear that name, each chosen for their similar markings. But anyone who knew horses could tell the difference. The original was gone, and something irreplaceable had been lost in that stable that October night. Fact number 3. The cook who never got rich when Hollywood's promise came with an asterisk too small to read. Victor Sen-Yung graduated from the University of California at Berkeley with a degree in economics, having studied animal husbandry, never imagining he'd spend 14 years playing Hop Sing, the ranch cook on the Ponderosa. He appeared in over 100 episodes of Bonanza, but here's what most people never knew. He was never part of the regular cast. Every single appearance was as a guest star, which meant he only worked when scripts called for Hop Sing and got paid by the episode. At a Chinese Historical Society dinner held in his honor in 1977, Sen-Yung reflected on what that actually meant. He told the audience that people assumed he'd appeared in every episode and become a millionaire from the show's success. The truth was far different. He'd only worked about 20% of those 14 years, not nearly enough to sustain himself. Between acting jobs, he gave cooking demonstrations in department stores and wrote The Great Wok Cookbook, published in 1974 and dedicated to his father. When he died alone in his modest North Hollywood bungalow in 1980 from accidental carbon monoxide poisoning, it was Pernell Roberts who paid for his funeral and delivered the eulogy. The man who'd walked away from Bonanza in frustration came back to honor the one who'd stayed. Fact number 2. The surgery that ended everything, when routine became tragedy and the Ponderosa lost its heart. Dan Blocker went into the hospital on May 13th, 1972, for what his doctors assured him was routine gallbladder surgery. He was 43 years old, at the absolute height of his career, and production on Bonanza's 14th season was just weeks away from starting. Nobody expected anything but a successful recovery and a return to work. But during the surgery, a blood clot formed and traveled to his lungs. The pulmonary embolism killed him before anyone could stop it. When Lorne Greene heard the news, he turned to his wife and said words that would prove prophetic. "That's it. It's finished." The cast and crew were shattered. Michael Landon and Greene had lost not just a co-star, but their closest friend. The network tried to continue without him, moving forward with that final season, but it was never the same. Landon wrote and directed the season premiere, Forever, an episode originally written for Hoss that Landon rewrote for Little Joe after Blocker's death. The episode obliquely referenced Hoss's passing, with scenes where Little Joe spoke of his big brother in the past tense.
That's my favorite place. Brother Hoss and I used to come here when we were kids. We didn't do anything special, we just sit and look at it.
And where Ben stared longingly at photographs. They couldn't bring themselves to say exactly how Hoss died, only that he was gone. The show limped through one more season before NBC canceled it mid-year. No grand finale, no proper goodbye. It just ended quietly, the way Blocker's life had ended, without warning or ceremony. Fact number 1. The finale that never was, when 14 years ended with a whisper and no one got to say goodbye. In November 1972, NBC called Lorne Greene and told him Bonanza was canceled. They gave him and the cast just a few days' notice before the final episode would air. 14 years of Sunday nights, 431 episodes, and there would be no time to write a proper farewell. The last episode to air was called The Hunter, written and directed by Michael Landon in a desperate rush. The script was only 39 pages long, making it the shortest in the series' history. It was a bleak, violent story, where Little Joe is hunted through the wilderness by a psychotic bounty hunter played by Tom Skerritt. There was only one brief scene at the ranch house at the beginning. No family gathered around the dinner table, no reflections on the years they'd spent together. Lorne Greene appeared only briefly at the beginning, then disappeared. Ben Cartwright, the patriarch who had anchored every episode for 14 years, was barely present for the end. When it aired on January 16th, 1973, most viewers didn't even realize they were watching the final episode. There was no announcement, no farewell message, no acknowledgement that an era was ending. Bonanza simply vanished from the airwaves, leaving behind only memories and the quiet understanding that some things don't get the goodbye they deserve.